Hello, I'm Doreen Kutzler, and I am here today to present a speech on the Power of Rhetoric for my History 227 class. And with this presentation, I'm going to speak to the comparison of ancient cultures and how it has impacted the government today. So, when we think of Egypt and the impact on later cultures, it was really immense. You could say that Egypt provided the building blocks for both Greek and Roman culture, and through them influenced all of Western tradition. So I'm going to compare the building blocks of Greek and Roman government and how the cultures had shaped what is part of our current day government system. You'll see influences today in structures, government roles, on various forms, even money in our day-to-day lives. This introduction provides you with the primary filters to understand ancient Greece and Rome and how they provided similarities and differences in today's current government. So let's take a look at Roman government as they compare to the government of the U.S. today. Roman law is the legal system of ancient Rome, including the legal developments spanning over 1,000 years of jurisprudence, which is the study and philosophical theory of law. From the 12 Tables, the law of the 12 Tables, which is the legislation that stood at the foundation of Roman law, they consolidated earlier traditions into an enduring set of laws. So Roman law forms the basic framework for civil law, and it's a legal system that originates in Europe, providing understanding within the framework of late Roman law, and whose most prevalent feature is that its core principles are codified into a referable system that serves as the primary source of law. The historical importance of Roman law is reflected by the continued use of Latin legal terminology in many legal systems influenced by it, again, including common law. So the law of the United States comprises many levels of codified and uncodified forms of law, of which most importantly for the United States is the Constitution. The Constitution is, of course, the foundation of the federal government of the United States and sets the boundaries of federal law, which consists of acts of Congress, treaties ratified by the Senate, regulations announced by an executive branch, and case law originating from the federal judiciary. The United States Code is the official compilation and organization of general and permanent federal statutory law. So, in both ancient Rome and in current-day U.S., the form of government is known as a republic, meaning public good. So, in a republic, people elect representatives to make decisions for them. The ancient Roman Republic had three branches of government in the beginning. The legislative branch was the Senate, a group made of up to 300 citizens, and they were from Rome's patrician class, and they were the oldest and wealthiest families in Rome. The Senate was the most powerful branch of the Roman Republic, and senators held the position for life. The executive branch was made up of two consuls, elected yearly. Those two consuls had almost kingly powers, both of which could veto or disapprove of the other's decision. It's quite possible that the idea of the two consuls came from Sparta and its two kings. Praetors were part of the judicial branch, and they were elected yearly by the people of Rome and acted as judges. So Rome did have a provision for a dictator to take over in case something would happen to the consuls. The consuls also had religious duties. Roman women were not allowed to participate in government affairs, whereas the U.S. has many women in government and legislative positions. The government of the United States under the Constitution includes a legislative branch, an executive branch, and a judicial branch. Under the legislative branch lies Congress and the Senate that has buildings that they conduct their meetings in, such as the Capitol, which has Roman influences, and under the executive branch, roles of the President, Vice President, and Executive Office of the President reside along with several offices and councils in support of the executive branch. The judicial branch includes the Supreme Court of the United States and roughly 10 lower-level courts under it. Now, as we compare the Greek government system to the U.S., the ancient Greeks were particularly concerned with such fundamental questions as who should rule and how. Should sovereignty lie in the rule of law, the Constitution, officials, or citizens? Not settling on a definitive answer, the government in the ancient Greek world took extraordinarily diverse forms, and it was across different city-states and over many centuries. Political power could rest in the hands of a single individual, as in monarchies or tyrants, or in a select few, such as the oligarchies, or in every male citizen, which is considered a democracy, widely regarded as the Greeks' greatest contribution to civilization. So, our knowledge of the political systems in ancient Greek world comes from a wide range of sources. For Athens, it's possible to piece together a more complete history. We have only an incomplete picture of the system in most city-states and in many details of how the political apparatus actually functioned and are actually missing. Surviving, though, are over 150 political speeches and 20,000 inscriptions, which include 500 decrees and 10 laws. There's also 2 specifically political texts with the same title, which is the Constitution of the Athenians. So when we think about their greatest contribution, which is a democracy, they called it a democracy because it respects the interests not of the minority but of the whole people. So when is it a question of settling private disputes? Everyone is equal before the law. When it's a question of putting one person before another in positions of public responsibility, what counts is not membership of a particular class, but the actual ability which the man possesses. So, with the word democracy deriving from the Greek word demos, which refers to the entire citizen body, and although it is Athens which has become associated with the birth of democracy from around 460 BCE, other Greek states did establish similar political systems. The Assembly of Athens met at least once a month, perhaps 2 or 3 times, on the Nix Hill, in a dedicated space which could accommodate up to 6,000 citizens. So any male citizen 18 years of older could speak, at least in theory, and vote in the assembly, usually with a simple show of hands. Attendance was even paid for in certain periods, which a measure to encourage citizens who lived far away and couldn't afford the time off to attend. Citizens probably accounted for 10 to 20% of poll population, and of these it has been estimated that only 3,000 or so people actively participated in politics. So of this group, perhaps as few as 100 citizens, the wealthiest, the most influential, and the best speakers, dominated the political arena, both in front of the assembly and behind the scenes in private. So critics of democracy, such as Aristophanes, also pointed out that the demos could be too easily swayed by a good orator or a popular leader and get carried away with their emotions. Perhaps the most famous bad decision from the Athenian democracy was the death sentence given to the philosopher Socrates in 399 BCE. So with United States government, there's similar processes that take place in the fact that there are votes, there are majority rules, there's a hand-raising process or a ballot process that takes place. When we elect government officials here in the United States, we go through the voting process, and those ballots are counted, similar to what the Greeks and Romans had experienced. So issues that get discussed range from, back in the Greek and Roman times, deciding magistracies or organizing and maintaining food supplies to debating military matters. There was in Athens a smaller body, the Boule, which decided to prioritize the topics which were discussed in the assembly. In times of crisis and war, this body could also take decisions without the assembly meeting. The Boule, or Council of 500 Citizens, was chosen by lot and had a limited term in office, and they acted kind of like an executive committee of the assembly. So the decrees of the assembly could also be challenged by the law courts, and the similar function of the Boule was that the Council of Elders select men over the age of 60 who were of Sparta, also had the 2 Spartan kings as members and had certain legal powers. In other Greek states, then there were also democratic assemblies, sometimes, though, with a minimum property stipulation for attendees. Some city-states also mixed democratic assemblies with monarchy. So, again, very similar to what we experience in modern-day U.S. government. There was a monarchy that existed in Greek, and it was rare, but very distinguishable from a tyranny when the hereditary ruler was more benevolent and ruled in genuine interest of his people. Excuse me. The most famous monarchies were those in the states of Macedonia and Epirus, where the ruler shared power with an assembly, limited though these were in practice. And although Sparta also possessed a citizen assembly, it's most famous for its system of 2 kings, not absolute monarchs. They did, however, hold great power when they led the Spartan army in times of war. So during peacetime, the kings were kept in check by ephors, who were themselves elected by the assembly. So clearly a degree of political consensus was necessary for the overlapping apparatus to function. Kings were also members of the Gerousia and were admitted from a young age, so that they must have had a significant advantage over other members who couldn't join until they were over 60. Spartan kings could, however, be put on trial and even exiled. So there was levels of tyranny where a sole ruler of a state had taken power in an unconstitutional manner, often murdering the predecessor. There's oligarchies, which is a system of political power controlled by a select group of individuals, sometimes smaller in number, but may at times include larger groups. And then there's public officials. So there's, again, similarities between all of these ancient histories of governments and what we see today in the United States. With Greece and the U.S., women, slaves, children, resident aliens did not have citizenship and could not vote. Today in the U.S., the majority of those individuals, although we don't have slaves any longer, can cast a vote. Elections are held through a lottery chance technique. There's a lottery, there's a vote, not necessarily a lottery, but a vote that takes place in the U.S. Citizenship was determined in a different way. In Athenian democracy, the right to citizenship was not determined by socioeconomic status, but by the power of appropriation. And the relations between classes were directly affected by democratic citizenship. So the legal system was challenging in Greece and Rome, and it was a challenge because they often represented themselves in court rather than getting a law or other official representatives to deal with the offense. So with the fact that today they have documents like our Constitution, and the Greeks' document is very similarly situated to what we have today in the United States. So I think that both Greek and Roman ideas, their basis for creating a government system has had a lasting effect on the world.